Yo, what's good? It's your man 100 Grand Ross for The Rock Never Stops. Today is another episode of the edition When Players Get It Wrong. And this edition is going to be on Dennis Schroder. This was a suggestion from a commenter, and I thought it was a wonderful suggestion because I followed his career pretty closely. Started off, he's a young point guard from Germany. Young brother, he had a lot of flair to his game, extremely quick, great lateral mobility, great burst, first step, really strong handle, great ability to get to the rim. Kind of reminded you of Tony Parker. Uh, and when he got drafted by the Atlanta Hawks, he was somebody that they were really high on. But if you remember that team, the Atlanta Hawks had a really good roster, and I thought that they actually botched this whole kind of franchise during that time because despite getting up to 60 wins and having four All-Stars, they couldn't get past LeBron James. And I understand it. Like, when you have an all-time great player, sometimes you're just not going to be able to beat them. Sometimes they are just better than anything that you can put together, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. He is a transcendent player. He's a transcendent player. LeBron James, number one, number two on your all-time list, right? Kareem is in there too, but you know what I mean? He's in that pantheon. Those guys are worth any great team that you could put together. If you don't have that guy, you can't take it personally. That's like if you go into the ring and you got knocked out by Mike Tyson. You can't take it personally. It wasn't about you didn't work hard enough. It wasn't about that you just weren't good enough. It wasn't about that you just did. No. This person was just that great. And they just happened to get you. And the Atlanta Hawks had a great roster. I believe during their peak, they had four All-Stars in that 60-win season. They had Paul Millsap, Al Horford. They had Jeff Teague. They had Kyle Korver. They had guys off the bench like Dennis Schroder. They also had Damari Carroll. Tim Hardaway Jr. was on that squad, actually. Shelvin Mack out of Butler, who was on that NCAA championship run. They had a strong, solid team. But they decided to break apart that team, starting with removing Jeff Teague for Dennis Schroder. They thought he had more upside, and they decided to move on from Teague, who was the consummate floor general, excellent point of attack defender. They had great continuity, extremely unselfish, great facilitator, and they went with the flashy guy, Dennis Schroder. And they quickly found out that Dennis Schroder wasn't that guy. He wasn't that guy. He was talented. Don't get me wrong. He was talented. By all intents and purposes, his ability to get to the cup, operate in the pick and roll, his ability to get into the cracks of the defense, play make, create his own shot. He had a lot of talent, a lot of skill. And if you follow Dennis Schroder when he plays in the World Games, I mean, he's an absolute monster. When he plays for the German national team, he is an absolute beast. And I actually need to get back on following them for these EuroLeague World Games because that should be a really good team with Franz Wagner, Moritz Wagner, along with Dennis Schroder. They might make a run. But when it comes to the NBA isn't just about being talented. You got to have basketball IQ. You got to have great physical abilities. And you have to have transcendent talent to rise to this space of prominence, to be a NBA starter, an NBA all-star, an all-NBA player. I mean, by the time you're all-NBA, you are of the best in the world. In the world. And the Atlanta Hawks thought Dennis Schroder could rise to the occasion and be that. And they soon realized it just wasn't him. It just wasn't him. As his shot attempts went up, his efficiency went down. His assist to turnover ratio kind of has remained at 2-1, which really isn't that good for a point guard. It's really almost, I don't want to say average to bad. It should be somewhere around 3-1. You should be able to take care of the ball more. But he just lacked some of these intangibles that you want from a floor general, from somebody who is supposed to lead a team deep into the playoffs. And eventually, they let him go. He gets sent to the Oklahoma City Thunder, where he's kind of like the first year there, he's kind of finding his way. But then that second season, they get Chris Paul. And this is where everything changes. Chris Paul, we all know who he is. He's a winner through and through. He runs the show. Somewhat of a dictator, but you kind of don't mind because the results are incredible. And he holds you to a high standard. And so Dennis Schroder goes back to the bench. And lo and behold, he has one of his best seasons of his career. Averaging close to 19 points a game, 18.9 points a game. Shooting, listen to these shooting splits. 46.9% from the field. 38.5% from three. 83.9% from the free throw line. Dennis Schroder, along with his 4 assists, played phenomenal basketball. I think he was in the running for Sixth Man of the Year that year. He just found his groove. But I'm going to be honest, I was watching him then too. They had a young Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that year as well. And they actually cracked into the playoffs. And when I was watching them in this first round of the playoffs, I said, man, Chris Paul is kind of a beast. And I forget who they were facing. It might have been Houston. But they were looking real scary. Because Chris Paul teams, they're going to compete against it doesn't matter who they face, they're going to compete. And all of a sudden, I started watching who was going to step up and who wasn't. And it was kind of disappointing because not only did Shai Gilgeous-Alexander not step up, neither did Dennis Schroder. Neither did Dennis Schroder. And when I say didn't step up, I mean their regular season stats went down. They went down. And that is extremely disappointing because you would anticipate if somebody is really as good as you think they are, you would assume that when they get into the playoffs, they're actually going to at least play to the same level, at least transfer to the same level, if not elevate, right? But I already told you the shooting splits from the previous, from that actual season. Look at what he did in the playoffs. He averaged 17 points on 40% shooting from the field. 45 to 40%. He went from 38% from the three to 28.9% from three. His assists went down to 3.6 from 4. He fell off. Now, this is nothing new if you're an Atlanta Hawks fan, because if you're an Atlanta Hawks fan, you're like, yep, we kind of saw that too. He kind of struggled. He doesn't necessarily elevate his game when he gets into those heated moments. So then the following year, he goes to the Los Angeles Lakers. And this is where Dennis Schroder gets it wrong. And I also put this on Rob Pelinka in the Los Angeles Lakers organization because they were permissive in this as well. He gets there, and it was really interesting to hear him say this. Man, if y'all remember this, Dennis Schroder, one of the first things he said is, I am the point guard. Now, come on. Come on. LeBron James, who was waxing your ass when y'all were in Atlanta, Dennis Schroder, who was facilitating, dominating, rolling over you guys. You saw one of the greatest players ever running the show. You saw it up close and personal. You know what he can do. And you arrive on the scene and you go, I'm running the point. Now, to me, this is arrogance. This is arrogance. I know in the NBA, there is a thin line, right? Like between this irrational confidence, right? And arrogance. But you need the irrational confidence to literally maximize your potential. And so I'm not necessarily mad at somebody who's like, look, hey, I believe in my talent. I believe in what I can do. And I'm going for it. Totally there for it. But when you have an all-time great, look, you weren't a starter when Chris Paul was there. You were the sixth man and you knew it. Now you go to LeBron James, one of the greatest floor generals, highest basketball IQs. He's essentially a bigger Chris Paul. Bigger, more athletic, 6'9", 250-pound Chris Paul. And you're going to go there and say, I'm the starter. Now, to LeBron James' credit, I'm sure he was, getting some shades of Kyrie Irving. He was like, look, I don't want another young cat feeling like he's not, really being brought into this. I want him to be a part of this. I want him to be confident. So you know what, Schroder? Come on in. Come on. You want to be the point guard? Go ahead. It's fine. Take the load off of me. I'll save it for the playoffs, right? So they let Dennis Schroder come in and think he's the point guard and run the show. I want you to listen to these splits, right? In 61 games with the Los Angeles Lakers, shooting 12 and a half shots a game, Dennis Schroder shoots 43.7%, below league average from the field. Then he shoots 33.5% from the three-point line, below league average, right? Shoots pretty good from the free throw line. Only 5.8 assists. This is playing with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. This was playing with the team that was able to get into the NBA Finals. That's who he was playing with. He goes in and says, I'm running the show. And that's what he puts up. But it doesn't stop there. Because then, towards the end of the regular season, we all knew that Dennis Schroder had a contract opportunity. And Rob Pelinka and the Los Angeles Lakers said, look, hey, I know you're not having the greatest season, but you know you're doing some good things for us. We still believe in you. We're going to give you 4-year, I believe it was $84 million. Let me just verify that really quick. They offered him, it was said he was offered, 4 years, $84 million extension. And Dennis Schroder turns it down, believing he's betting on himself, saying, I deserve even more than that. So then the playoffs start. Of course, as always, his stats go down. He ends up shooting 14 points a game in 32 minutes in the first round. He shoots 40% from the field. This is probably one of his worst playoff performances of his career. 40% from the field, 30.8% from three, and only 2.8 assists to his 1.7 turnovers. This is not just a bad playoff series. This is a nightmare playoff series. On the biggest stage, on one of the greatest franchises, playing with one of the greatest players of all time, two of some of the greatest players of all time. This is what he puts up. And he goes out of that playoff series. Offer no longer on the table. You know what he ends up signing? A qualifying offer with the Boston Celtics. I think it's like 5.6 million, something like that, for 1 year. And then he ends up getting traded mid-season to the Houston Rockets. You see, there's something incredible in life about understanding who you are. When you know who you are, right, you're no longer competing against others. You're competing with yourself and not against yourself. But you are able to maximize what you know yourself to be, betting on your strengths and knowing that you have an opportunity to be your best you every single day. You see, there's nothing worse than somebody who thinks they're something that they're not, right? So then at times they're not even able to do at least what you know that they should be able to do. You see, it wasn't just Dennis Schroder who suffered statistically with the Los Angeles Lakers, but it was the team as a whole, because when he was initially brought in, he was brought in alongside Montrezl Harrell. And Montrezl Harrell was coming from the Los Angeles Clippers, who was also a Sixth Man of the Year candidate, who had a tremendous, I think he averaged like close to almost 20 points a game with the Clippers. And they were being brought in together to supplement their bench scoring. They were supposed to be this dynamic duo off the bench, both of them averaging close to 20 points per game, being able to run the show. I mean, the whole thought process was, hey, we got LeBron and AD in this starting lineup, right? We got a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. We got some fillers. We got Dwight in the middle. We got, we have this roster, this team that's set up in this starting lineup where what we truly need is somebody to come off the bench and allow our starters to rest and really be able to push us and propel us forward. So by the time the starters get back out there, we've either maintained or increased our lead, and we should be coasting into the playoffs. That was the mindset. Dennis Schroder comes in and says, no, I'm going to be the starter. So what that did was now that elite playmaking that he was able to do, especially in the pick and roll, and his ability to get into the cracks of the defense and manipulate the defense to be able to play make, facilitate, set guys up, and get his own shot, where he was able to do it at an extremely efficient rate with Oklahoma City. He was no longer able to provide that. And so Montrezl Harrell, now he's coming off the bench, but no playmaker. He doesn't have a facilitating playmaking point guard who can run that pick and roll with him, that pick and pop, and maximize his game. So his game suffered, right? You end up having guys like Alex Caruso having to come off the bench now instead of starting. We now see what his potential was when he got to Chicago, right? That's what he was able to bring. Some of his statistics alongside LeBron James was absolutely through the roof, phenomenal in terms of what he was able to do when he was paired with LeBron James, right? How much better it would have been to have another full season playing with one of the greatest players of all time, right? With players who play wonderfully next to him, right? Dennis Schroder got it wrong. And it affected the team. Rob Pelinka is definitely not off the hook because you're supposed to come in when you sign the guy and say, this is your role. We just want a championship. You're not coming in here demanding and telling us what we have to do to suit you. Do you have a championship? Are you coming from a championship team? Did you just do something that validates you coming in here claiming that you should have a certain role? You know what I'm saying? You're not even Kyrie Irving. You're not this unstoppable offensive force, right, that can dominate in the playoffs in the crunch time when it matters the most. That's not you. You are Dennis Schroder, who can tear up the EuroLeague, but here you are a role player. You come off the bench. When you know who you are, you have the ability to be the best version of yourself. There are some guys who become great players, and there are other guys who become great role players. Some of them become all-star role players, the PJ Tuckers, right? Those guys who know who they are and do them so well, they are indispensable. This is why every offseason when PJ Tucker is a free agent, teams can't wait to sign him who are trying to win championships because he knows who he is. Dennis Schroder thought he was something else. And it cost the Lakers. It cost him. And now he's still a free agent. Where he ends up, I think he'll probably end up someplace. I wouldn't mind seeing him with the Toronto Raptors, though they already have a lot of players there. I think he could be a great playmaking point guard, do what he does off the bench. I don't know if he fits because he doesn't exactly play defense at a high level, but I think his scoring would be highly welcomed. His veteran scoring would be highly welcomed off the bench. And then you can keep Delano Banton, Malachi. You could keep all those guys, Jalen Harris and Johnson and all those young guys. Let them develop in the G League another year. Because the veterans that the Toronto Raptors have with Thaddeus Young, Otto Porter Jr., and those guys coming off the bench with Precious Achiuwa, Chris Boucher, right, Kim Birch, those guys, they just need a veteran to run that unit. And if he can accept his role and who he is, I think he can have a great bounce back here. But we'll see. I want to know what you all think. Definitely hit the like button for me. Hit subscribe, the bell for notification. Definitely leave some comments. I always respond to them as much as I can. And with that, I'm going to holler at y'all next time. Peace.